Hey, Pastor Mark here. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a great week so far. I want to talk this week about a story that you're probably pretty familiar with, but I'm going to recap it just in case you're not. There was a man in the Old Testament in the book of Exodus called Moses, and Moses was told by God via a bush on fire in the desert that God was aware of the suffering of his people, the Israelites, at the hand of the Egyptians. The Egyptians had enslaved the Israelites, 1 million or more of the Israelites, and they were like free slave labor to the Egyptians to build whatever they wanted to be built and to serve them in any capacity they wanted to be served. God said that he had heard their cries for help and he was going to do something about it, and Moses was his man. Moses and God have a long conversation. Moses eventually begrudgingly goes, and he goes to see Pharaoh, and Moses tells Pharaoh exactly what God told him to tell him. You need to let my people Israel go. And he tells him this time after time after time after time. And then Pharaoh always says no. And every time Pharaoh says no, I'm not going to let the people go, God sends a plague. And there was a plague of darkness at one point where God turned the entire land dark. And there were a plague of gnats and a plague of flies. And there was a plague where Moses, via God's power, literally turned the Nile River and all the other bodies of water to blood. That's pretty disgusting. And there was a plague of locusts and a plague of hail where God destroyed the crops with hail. And there was another plague where God killed all the livestock in the land because Pharaoh's heart was hardened towards God and he would not let the people of Israel go. But there was one plague in particular and it was actually the second plague, that really kind of baffles my mind, and about this man named Pharaoh, the king of the Egyptians. And it was the plague where God sent frogs into the land of Egypt. And it's not like he wasn't warned about it either. Pharaoh was literally told by Moses, if you don't let God's people go, the Israelites go, then God is going to send a plague of frogs. And Pharaoh doesn't do anything about it. And so in Exodus chapter 8 and verse 6, it says, So Aaron, Moses' brother, stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land. Like, the frogs were everywhere. And I mean, everywhere, in everything, in every imaginable place, we're talking, wherever you went, frogs existed, and that's disgusting. But the thing that really baffles my mind is that in verse 8, it says that Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, Pray to the Lord to take the frogs away from me and my people, and I will let your people go to offer sacrifices to the Lord. And so Moses said to Pharaoh, I leave to you the honor of setting the time for me to pray for you and your officials and your people, that your houses may be rid of the frogs, except for those that remain in the Nile. And then in verse 10, Pharaoh says something that just baffles my mind. He didn't say, okay, pray right now, do it right now, and in front of everybody here, I'm so sick of these frogs, I want them gone, it's disgusting, it's filthy, it's nasty. He doesn't say right now. He says tomorrow. He says, pray tomorrow. And so Pharaoh literally has to spend one more night with the frogs. He would rather spend one more night with the frogs in disobedience towards God than to be rid of the frogs and to be right with God right then and there. And this is so crazy, but you know what? It's really not as crazy as it may sound when I read the Bible and was reading through this account. It actually makes a whole lot of sense, because when I think about it, I'm probably a lot more like Pharaoh than I care to admit. There have been some times in my life where I would rather deal with the consequences of my actions, the negative consequences of my actions, than be right with God and right with others. I would rather spend one more night with the frogs, so to speak, than to become reconciled to those around me who I've hurt, or those who have been affected by my actions. And I want to challenge you this week. If you've ever been like me or like Pharaoh and said, I would rather spend one more night with the frogs, one more night of misery, one more night just refusing to become right or admit that I was maybe wrong, than to be made right with God and with others, can I just ask you maybe to consider swallowing your pride? Offer the apology that needs to be offered. Come clean about whatever it is you need to come clean, and then just experience the freedom of not having to deal with regret and remorse and shame and guilt, and it's just a pretty freeing experience altogether. Instead of spending one more night with your frogs, whatever those may be to you. Thanks for checking in this week. I hope you have a great rest of the week. I hope God does an amazing work in your life through letting go of some frogs. We'll see you later.